By 2032, ACT will empower 20.2 million more learners to exit high school ready for post-secondary and work opportunities. We will concentrate our work around 5 strategic pillars: build, inform, connect, mobilize, and partner. We are collaborating with key stakeholders to bring this bold new vision to life. We've got our work cut out for us, and with your support moving forward, we will make it happen.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Iowa Ideas. My name is Tom Banta, and I will be moderating today's session. We are in session number 5 of the K-12 track today, and today's conversation will be focused on long-term strategies in workforce recruitment. Specifically, we will be talking to a couple leaders from local districts as they share their experience and perspective on the challenges of recruiting educators to their respective communities and locations. Before we dive in, I am going to recognize our sponsors of this event, and ITC Midwest is the event sponsor. Thank you, ITC Midwest. As ACT is our track sponsor for today, so ACT is sponsoring our K-12 education track. Thank you to both of those organizations for their support. Thank you to the Gazette for bringing us together and giving us the opportunity to share this conversation and have this discussion today. So I am joined by Eric Howard, Jamie Walker-Salas, and we will have one other panelist joining us here shortly. But as we dive in here, I am going to turn it over and let them introduce themselves and get things going here. So, Eric, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what district you're with, and tell us a little bit about how you found your way into the role you're in today.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Eric Howard. I'm the Director of Equity and Employee Relations here for the Iowa City Community School District. My path to education was a little bit untraditional. So I grew up in a family of educators, but I was always encouraged not to go into education. You know, you're not going to be able to support a family in education. You're not going to be able to you're not really going to be able to live a comfortable life if you go into education. So I was always kind of swayed away from it. How I ended up getting an interest in education, though, was when I started coaching. So I was an assistant wrestling coach at my old high school in Louisiana. And so I realized the impact that you can have on students' lives, you know, just by being a supportive person in their lives and helping guide their improvement, you know, even though it was related to wrestling, you know, just kind of seeing how that adding that structure and environment really could have a profound impact on students' lives. And so long story short, I still got forced into education. So I moved to Iowa to attend Drake Law. And then I also received the master's in teacher effectiveness and professional development at Drake as well. So I've been in education now for about 8 years. I've kind of bounced around from a school business official to human resource services director at the Iowa Association of School Boards. And I've now been at the Iowa City Community School District now for about 2.5 years. So it's a very interesting journey into education, but I'm happy that I'm here right now.
Well, we're happy to have you. Thanks, Eric, and welcome. Look forward to hearing more from you today. Janelle, tell us a little about your story, where you're from, and how you found your way into education.
Sure. Hi, I'm Janelle Brower. I am currently the superintendent for Marion Independent School District in Marion, Iowa. Prior to this role, I've also held roles as assistant superintendent in the district. And prior to that was a special education coordinator in an AEA. I've also worked as a building principal in Western Dubuque School District at the elementary level and middle school level. And then I have held teaching roles in both special education and elementary education. Similar to Eric, but not the same path, certainly. I did not choose education as a field. I feel more as though education chose me. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I lived on a farm, learned farm life. My dad was a farmer. My mom was a teacher. And so I grew up seeing how hard my parents worked and was determined that I was never going to teach and I was never going to farm. However, as a college student, I went knowing exactly what my major was going to be, exactly my career path, and I changed it 3 times. And was fortunate to have a few people in my path at the college level who encouraged me to consider education. And then also, even as a student teacher, had a principal who sought me out and told me to consider a pathway in administration, that it's really important that we have strong leaders, especially strong women leaders that our students can look up to and aspire to. And so I just appreciate the people in my path who have kind of planted those seeds and helped pave the direction for me.
That's great, Janelle. I look forward to digging deeper into some of those stories as we get into this. Welcome. And Jamie, tell us your story.
For me, it was quite different in regards to how I got into education. I started going to school to be a teacher, expressively to be a special education teacher. And I taught special education for 25 years and doing that at the elementary level, even receiving my master's in special education early on. It was my desire always to be a teacher. My current role now for Davenport Community Schools is to be equity innovator, which is a teacher leader position in which I get to work with teachers and helping them to be better teachers. And so, yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher.
That's great. That's great. Well, one of the formats for this Iowa Ideas really centers around storytelling, right? And what we're going to do for our audience members here as we dive in deeper today is tell a story. And we're going to start a little bit with the history. And thank you for the three of you sharing a little bit about your history. We're going to focus on the current state and kind of what's going on with the challenge that we're facing right now. We're going to share a little bit about our ideal state, or where are we trying to go? What's that aspirational state? What does success look like for us? And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the programs and pathways or things that we're trying to get there. And then we're going to share some ways that maybe our audience members can help move this initiative forward, carry these conversations forward within their own communities, or just offer some insight and support. So I encourage you, for those in the audience, please engage your Whova app, ask questions, funnel those questions in throughout. And as we get through into the conversation, we'll do our best to weave those in and keep it fluid. But please share your ideas and thoughts. This is a forum to ask the experts, folks that have been carrying the bag for a while, and get their perspective on some of these challenges. So with that said, Janelle, why don't you dive in and tell us a little bit more about the history of this issue as you see it?
Sure. So in Iowa, and I started my pathway in Iowa in an undergraduate program. I started my teaching career in the state of Iowa. I've also been in the state of Idaho. When I started as a teacher, I was one applicant of a couple hundred in an elementary position. The teaching profession was really, truly inundated at one point with educators going into the profession. It was viewed as a very desirable profession, a family-friendly profession, and certainly something that we saw a lot more educators pursuing the role of teacher. So I remember my pathway of entering or interviewing for my teaching job, and I was just excited to be offered a job. I didn't ask questions about what benefits do you offer, what's the pay, what's my work schedule, what's the master contract look like, how many leave days. I didn't care. I was one of a who was offered a job, and that in and of itself was a victory. Similarly, at the time when I entered the profession, most of the administrative level candidates were male superintendents, were male principals, so that administrative level looked very different. But it certainly was not a challenge to hire in or pursue or recruit into the field of education.
Thank you. Jamie or Eric, do you want to add anything to that?
I would just say that, you know, the history of education in Iowa too, you know, it's been fairly, you know, homogenous. You know, even at a district like Iowa City, you know, which is now one of the more diverse districts in the state, about 20 years ago, it was vastly different. So the demographics of the state are changing. Unfortunately, the workforce is not. So there's not that match between our students seeing themselves in their educators.
Thank you.
32 years ago, when I went to school for education, it was a little bit different.
Well, let's talk about maybe kind of the current state then. As you guys shared, you know, it sounds like it still was, you know, somewhat homogenous. Maybe it is today. The demand for the career seemed to be fairly high. It was a highly desired opportunity. What's the current state look like in your respective districts? Jamie.
Currently, we are looking at different pathways to encourage positions to be filled, as in, trying to think, it's called apprenticeships. And so what we're doing now is, in working with the state, we have apprenticeship programs where there are paraeducators who are going to school and working during the day to become educators. And so that wasn't something that I know of that has happened in the past, to try to increase the amount of teachers that we have in the field. Before, like she said, there were hundreds and hundreds of people trying to get just one position. And now we're trying to figure out new ways to get more educators in the field.
Excellent. Janelle, talk a little bit about, you know, when you put an opening out for an educator in your schools, what's the application pool look like generally?
Yeah, we're at the point where an elementary position, which is commonly the most sought after, we get the most applicants, we might be looking at 15 to 20 compared to a couple hundred. So that's a dramatic shift. There are a number of positions that we could have 0 applicants, and statewide, there are at this time a number of unfilled positions in classrooms yet today, and we're obviously a ways into the school year. So we have districts that are looking at things like, how do you provide virtual instruction or an online option? How do you coordinate with a neighboring district who is teaching in the classroom but would also allow some type of online platform for your students in your classrooms with an associate maybe supervising? So there are certainly several unfilled teaching positions statewide, especially in areas such as special education. Additionally, many of our high school pathways, such as math, science, but also industrial tech, family consumer science, I believe within the last couple of years, statewide, there may have been 1 or 2 applicants who came out of a teacher prep program. So statewide, we're competing for those 1 or 2 certified applicants. We will also have a number of teachers each year across the state who start on either an emergency decision license or a conditional license, which means they have not completed all their certifications for a specific endorsement. And so they're teaching during the day and then acquiring additional credit hours towards an endorsement during the evening and summers and weekends to be able to be certified in whatever area they're teaching. The other part that I think is important to this conversation, in my district specifically, it's about half of our staff, just over half our staff, who are certified teachers or administrators. But we also have nearly 50% of our staff who are classified staff, our custodians, our secretarial support, our bus drivers, our student associates. And those positions are extraordinarily hard to fill as we see wages in the private or in the private sector increase. We're competing with McDonald's and Walmart and Casey's for applicants to fill those types of roles as well.
That's a great point, and it sounds like a challenging environment. Certainly, I think where I first go is immediately thinking about challenges in hiring that frontline educator, but it's, quickly realize there's a lot more that goes on inside of that building beyond just the education. So, Eric, can you share a little bit about what you're seeing in your district as it relates to some of these challenges? And
Yeah, I would say a lot of that is, we would echo the same, it's just overall nationally, the number of students entering a teacher prep program has dropped significantly. I think the last time I saw it, it was like 40% over the last decade. And I know Iowa, historically has always done a little bit better than that average, but I think even if I remember correctly, even for Iowa, it was in the 30s. So we're doing better, but not by much. Typically for teachers, we're hiring about anywhere from 80 to 100 teachers every year, and we've been blessed just geographically being so close to the university that we haven't had a terrible time hiring teachers, but we're even at the point now where we're starting to feel that pinch. Eventually it's going to get to the point where we're going to struggle to fill a lot of those roles as well. As for nutrition, busing, all of that has been extremely difficult. The hours itself make it difficult in terms of finding people who have that availability to work those hours, and our pay it's not keeping up with those employers. I know we have Amazon here nearby as well, so that's also challenging for us, but we're doing the best we can. We realize that now we have to do more in terms of growing our own educators. We have to do a bigger we have to put a lot more resources in terms of building that pipeline from identifying students at an earlier point in time, and getting them into education. So it's been a struggle, but we're trying to be creative and find some other ways to help keep that pipeline going.
thank you, Eric. And we'll dive into some of those here in a moment, but talk a little bit, Janelle, you talked a little bit briefly, but Jamie and or Eric, what are some of these knock-on impacts of not having the educators, right? You're moving things online, you're sharing with other, if this stays pervasive or continues, what are the other changes that need to be made in order to continue to educate students?
I think the reality is that we are looking at situations of having to increase class size to condense and be able to have a certified teacher in front of students. And so that's one of the challenges. We also, anytime we're short-staffed in other areas, that means that people are filling in for one another, or the workload just gets more demanding. And so that just like any other position anywhere, the level of impact that stress and additional work demand has can permeate a system very quickly. And so I think we've become a lot more focused, probably nationally, on the emotional impact that that the job has on our employees, and how do we best support the overall employee and ensure that they have what they need, not just the tools and resources, but also the appropriate leave time, the appropriate benefits that will help them take care of themselves as well, so that they can take care of others.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's one thing to attract and recruit your next generation of educator, but it's also equally important to keep the ones you've got and allow that and support them. Jamie, talk about some of the things that you're seeing pop up as it relates to educator support. And obviously COVID was a challenging time for many. Certainly you as educators were on the front line of that. I'm sure there is some continued ripple effects from those last few years, but what are you seeing in ways that you're managing kind of the retention side of things and working to support educators that may have been stretched beyond the normal day to day?
A lot of it in regards to support is just supporting teachers to be able to manage the day to day. Oftentimes, teachers are covering for other teachers when they're absent. And so, what that does is that reduces the time that they have to accomplish the tasks that they need to do on a day to day basis, because that prep period that they would have been preparing, they're covering while someone is not available to be in class. And so, that means they're either doing it before school or doing it after school. And so, that time that would have been self-care time or prep time is really, we're taking care of kids' time. And so it's just helping teachers to manage all that. It's stressful.
Yeah. Eric?
I would say one of the things that we it's brought up a couple of times here, but just about being aware of that employee wellness. There's a reason we have fall breaks in October. There's a lot of research on just how the school year and the impact it has mentally on teachers. This is roughly the time of year where teachers are at their lowest point in terms of their mental health. And so just kind of being aware of the timeline, how just this is the point where grades are due. There's a lot of different demands. The year's gotten off to start. That initial excitement is kind of, that honeymoon period of the school year is kind of worn off. So just kind of making sure that, hey, this is a cycle. It's gonna continue to build. You're gonna continue to see that improvement. This is natural. There's evidence behind it. Things will get better. Being more mindful of those things as the year goes on. That is just a natural part of being an educator. So things, it is a cycle that happens every year where this time of year is a little bit, I would say, roughly the hardest part of the year. But being aware for that, adjusting the calendar to make sure that we are aware of that.
Let's shift our focus a little bit here. And as you guys talked about early on, some of the challenges, right? It used to be a high demand career. We're not seeing that. We're seeing less and less interest. The trends are not supporting future interest in this. So what are some of the things, and then you're sharing some of the knock-on impacts of that and creating the stress on the folks that are in the role, but also some of the other implications it means for larger class size or things along those lines. As you think about that, you also are trying to shift your demographics and, in an environment where you've got fewer candidates, likely fewer diverse candidates as well. Talk to me about some of the programs, some of the initiatives that you're doing within your respective districts to try and address some of that, whether it be a kind of a grow your own, as you suggested, Eric, in this Educator Rising program that I'd like for you to touch on, or a complementary retention strategy that you're doing on the back end as well. So you got to build your front end pipeline, and you also have to hold on to what you've got. So Eric, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the Iowa City School District?
Sure. So, just overall, we know that there has to be a lot more time and attention in terms of, building that workforce, identifying students at an earlier point in their academic career as those who might be very, great teachers down the road for us. So, a program we started about 2 years ago is called Educators Rising. The way that is set up is it's in all 4 of our high schools. There's a sponsor in each building. And what we did was we when we do our career surveys, we identified those who had some sort of interest in education, and just reached out to them personally to, get them some more background on education, introduce them to some of the curriculum aspects of teaching, and to help get them that coursework, to help them get that coursework so that they can see if education is right for them. We partner with the Kirkwood Community College and their early, I'm going to butcher this here, the Early Childhood Academy, I believe is what it's called. And so there's 5 courses that are available to the students. If they complete that, they will have the coursework for when they turn 18. They can work in daycare centers, or even in our kind of our wraparound care facilities as well. So that's one of the benefits from it. Another one as well, we can it gets them set up already to take those courses to get an associate's degree in and their paraeducator certificate, so that they can work as a support staff member in our district. The goal is that eventually, those students will go from student to support staff to eventually teacher. I know we've got some plans we've been working on with the University of Iowa as well. So once they receive that associate's degree, they can take that and then come back to the district. So still very early on in the process, but we're happy with what we are seeing so far. I know for the first class last year, we had five students that were going through it, and we're monitoring them, seeing what their progress is. And I know this year we're hoping that number can get closer to 30. So we're excited for it, and just want to see how things progress.
Oh, that's great. It looks like a program that was that young Janelle would have valued. So Janelle, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Marion School District.
Sure. So in addition to looking at the grow your own opportunities, we really have spent a tremendous time. How do we both recruit and retain? And what we know is that people come for a job in general, but they stay because of how they feel and the connections that they have. And so for recruiting, but really for retention, we look at trying to develop a culture that itself. We want our people recruiting to our buildings because I can spend all an energy and trying to sell our district, but if my employees are telling a different story out in the public, my efforts are worthless. And so by pouring into our current staff and encouraging them to help message what's great about our district is part of our recruitment strategy. We have started things such as we've always had a teacher mentoring program, but we now also have a mentoring program for any new classified staff member, where we partner them with a new hire is partnered with an existing employee for 90 days. And the focus of that program is really, it's 3 aspects. It's making connections to the role of the job, connections to the people within their building, and the connections, that emotional relational connection, as well as connections to the larger district and community. And so we train our classified mentors, and it's people who we know will pour into others and want to support them in being the best that they can be, that their role is helping ensure that the reason people leave our organization is not because they don't feel they had the support that they needed. If it's about the work or the pay, there might be things we can't change, but we want to ensure people don't leave for reasons that are within our control. So that's one aspect. We also, when we hire, ensure that our strategic plan and our core values are a huge part of that hiring process. So we talk with candidates about the core values. They'll see what does that mean to be part of Marion, and how do you in any role as a bus driver, the core values of collaborative relationships still hold true in the same way they do for a classroom teacher. We also really work on the fact that it takes all of us in the system. No one role is more important or less important than the others. That collective efficacy within our system is critical to ensuring that that we can positively impact our students. One of the other recent things that we've done is added a personal leave benefit that's part of our longevity benefit. So after every 5 years of employment, we add an additional personal leave day for our staff. And we've kind of flipped the mindset of, instead of paying out for unused personal leave at the end of the day, we encourage people to take their leave. That the job does have stresses in it, and we want people to take care of themselves so that they can take care of others. And so we encourage them, use your leave, and we will add more leave the longer you're within our system. Those are just a few examples. The last one I'll share is, we've realized in the education system, we can be our own worst enemy in recruiting new people into the profession. It's not uncommon for a teacher to hear a student say, "Oh, I want to be a teacher someday," and the teacher to say, "No, you don't want that." So we're very candid with our staff that we play a role in what our students' pathway is. And if they say they want to be a teacher, help encourage them in the positive aspects. That doesn't mean don't be real with them. But we also need to stop unrecruiting into the profession, while also advocating for the profession itself within our community. That teaching is an honorable profession. We have people who care and are passionate in the field. And so it's a great opportunity that, yes, it has some challenges, but the benefits are amazing if it's something that fills your bucket. And so making sure we stop unrecruiting, and then also looking at internship options for our students within, if they want to be a future teacher, how do we make sure they have partnerships with an existing teacher? If their pathway is secretarial, partnering them with our building secretaries so they see non-instructional positions in the field of education that also could be their future pathway.
Jamie, I know you talked about apprenticeships as a tool and a vehicle to increase your talent pipeline. What are some other things you're seeing in the Davenport schools, whether it be on the front end of this grow your own scenario or the back end on the retention strategies?
One of the things that we do, similar to Janelle, is our new teachers receive support for 2 years with with teachers who work with them on a regular basis and support them in their classrooms. So they receive quarterly meetings where they all come together as new teachers and receive professional development in the evenings, where they're all together as new teachers receiving support. We've done something special this year where we've provided them professional development days. So when the whole district is receiving professional development, they had some additional professional development training where all the new teachers and new hires were together to receive professional development, in a cohort setting. And so we tried to look at them as a instructional group and provide things to them in a different way, in a different format. So we actually have 7 instructional coaches just for our new teachers, and they have caseloads where they're only working with those new hires, and that's for the new teachers, and they work with them for 2 years. And so they have ongoing support for that 2-year cycle. And then when we have our new hires to the district, and those are new experienced hires, they receive support for a year into the district where someone is there for them to provide them additional support, whether it's the building instructional coach or even tap into that person that's there for the new hires with the beginning educators. And so we look at them as a specific cohort of teachers, knowing that they're new to the profession, and that it takes them just a little bit longer to get their feet settled into the district, and knowing that they need someone not so much to hold their hand, but to shoulder coach with them, because it's a big difference from going to college and then coming into that actual setting with students. And so we want them to have success, absolute success. And so we're there to support them with that.
Excellent. So as you think about some of these challenges that you're facing, obviously Iowa is not unique necessarily. This is a national challenge, it sounds like. If it continues down this path, right, less and less interest, we're not shifting the demand. What are you hearing, or what are some concerns, or what does the industry do? How do you adapt? Are there technology plays? What is it that you're starting to hear or see, whether it be here in Iowa or outside of our borders, that is getting a little bit of attention, and share a little bit about that? Any one of the three, if you've got.
I'm hoping here in Iowa that we don't do things that we hear different stories that are happening outside of our borders. I don't want to talk about those horror stories where they're having to bring in people who aren't certified educators to teach students. I don't want to do that here in Iowa. I want to always have certified educators in front of students to give them the best.
So that is some of the solutions. Some of they're lowering the requirement to put a body in the room. Not trying to diminish that, but
not in Iowa, not here in Iowa, in other states.
Okay. What else are you hearing or seeing?
I think the words I would use to describe kind of what we need, or where we go as a state, is celebrate, advocate, legislate. The teaching profession needs to get back to a location across the public narrative where it's respected. And unfortunately, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot of support for the teaching profession, but there's also a very negative narrative. And that can be heartbreaking for those in the profession who are, they're teaching all day, they're subbing for their colleagues, they're prepping until 6 o'clock at night. The demands are exceptional. And so as an educational system, we need to continue to to celebrate what's going well. We need to celebrate our students. We need to celebrate the positives that are taking place within and outside of our walls. Because we have kids and teachers doing amazing things across the state, and we're there with a passion to help our Iowa kids succeed. As far as advocating, I think that for me, from my perspective, comes down to advocating that educators, just like other professions, do need to have wage increases that keep up with the cost of living. And the reality is, when we look at a school budget and what budgets go to, 80% of a typical school district's budget is salaries. So when we are making budget cuts, or when we do not have a state increase that will keep up with that cost of living, that means either we are reducing staff, or they are not getting a wage increase that will allow them to keep up with kind of the inflationary costs. So that level of just understanding and advocacy that the teaching profession, like many, they have a 4-year or a 6-year, or in some cases they're going to school for a lifetime degree, but unfortunately the pay and the benefits often does not offset what that could be in other professions. And as far as legislative, and this kind of goes back to what Jamie said, there is a balance between lowering the standards so much that you're just putting a body who's uncertified in front of students, and also recognizing that in our state, we have a lot of different endorsement requirements for different pathways. And so ensuring that we have a certified teacher to cover some of the state requirements, especially in our small districts, can be very challenging with the number of endorsements a teacher may have to hold. And so how do we also look at each endorsement may equate to, 12, 24, 36 credit hours. And so it's not just a quick weekend class. How do we ensure that our teachers who are in the profession also are able to teach in areas of expertise and not make that endorsement be a greater barrier? And so some of those things require legislative action as well.
Thank you, Janelle. Eric, anything to add to both Jamie and Janelle's perspective on this?
I mean, I think what they shared was great. It's a multifaceted problem. We even see an issue where if we're trying to recruit teachers from out of state, they can run into licensure barriers that they might have been perfectly able to. They might have had a 4-year degree, had the licensure in their state, but then they come to Iowa and there are barriers in terms of being able to teach here. It's tough. I mean, I don't really have a good answer for it. I think the biggest thing that we can do is just keep looking at different ways to get more people into the profession. Like how do we get someone who didn't go into education to be a teacher? Like how do we cover for could be a potential loss in income, potential it could be a number of things that person might have to give up just to go into education. And like, how do we successfully transition, some of those professionals into the teaching role? So I don't know. Unfortunately, that's the best that I can give. Like, there's a lot of different things that we can try, but we're really not. We have to try a lot of different things and just hope that enough sticks to keep to meet the needs that we have for our students.
Sure. Well, if there's an audience member listening or someone listening, and maybe they have someone in their family that has an interest or expressed an interest, maybe they're going to do a career shift. The last few years has opened the door for that, right? So what would that pathway look like if someone like myself or others that maybe have a 4-year degree, or maybe they don't, maybe they have a 2-year degree or no degree at all, and they decided that there's a calling for them, what would that look like if someone were interested in pursuing an educator career at this stage of outside of their traditional school pathway?
It depends on whether or not they have a degree. I guess we should start there. For example, if you're in the career tech field, and you're someone who wants to move from CTE, say you're a mechanic and you want to be a mechanic at school and you have all of those certifications, there's a pathway for that where you can come in and receive specific certifications. You can go to school and get additional schooling to become that career tech educator. There's a pathway for that. Say you're an engineer and you want to become an engineer teacher, because we have a career tech field for that, there's a pathway for that. So because of the opportunities that there are now for the field of education, there are alternative pathways in which people who have 4-year degrees can get additional schooling and licensure through different pathways to do that second career and come into the field of education. So it's never too late to do that career switch. It will take, especially here in the state of Iowa, it will take some additional coursework, but there's always an opportunity to go through that additional pathway and take additional courseworks to make that switch.
Thank you, Jamie. Have you seen folks in your district? Has this been something that has emerged the last couple of years as a pathway in?
Yes, I work with the new hires and the new experienced hires. So I'm aware of some of our CTE career tech educators, some of the fellows that have come and work with our high school kids in the auto body shop. Some of the guys have come. So they're not, young, fresh kids out of college, these are guys that have worked in their field and have gotten additional certification, additional schooling to come into the high school and do that job. Or we have retired military who've received additional certification and have come to do ROTC in the schools, in the high schools. So there are alternative pathways that maybe you didn't start off fresh out of college and you wanted to go to school to teach. You went to another field, another career, and then you decided later in life, oh, maybe I want to take this learning that I've done over the course of the last 20 years or 15 years or whatever, and teach it to kids in school. There's an alternative pathway where you can get additional certification. I will keep that caveat out there. There is additional certification required. You can't just say you want to go to school and do it. Can't do that. But there is alternative pathways where you do need additional certification, requirements to be able to do it. But we would love to have you, because that is one of the areas where we have a shortage, is that career tech field, that home economics, engineering classes, auto body shop, welding. Those are some of the places where there are many, many shortages.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I think Janelle touched on that a little bit earlier, and these specialized areas in increasingly high demand. There's high need, and as it relates to a lot of the work-based learning, project-based learning, experiential things, it's important to get folks that have that field experience and be able to create those opportunities. So, Eric or Janelle, are you seeing other? And I guess the other thing, are there financial resources to support that additional credentialing that you're talking about? And if so, can you talk to that?
Yeah, so one example we've touched on previously is the apprenticeship program. So across the state, there are a number of grant funded, and Marion and Iowa City actually are in the same collaborative, where someone can work as a student associate or paraprofessional. So employed, pursuing a teaching degree. The courses then under the grant are paid for. They still obviously have to take the courses and do the work, but able to maintain then full-time employment and be paid as a paraprofessional during the day, evening coursework that is paid. And then the other wonderful aspect of that, if others aren't aware, it is not actually legal for teachers for you to be paid for your internship. So in other words, student teaching, you paid a student teach, you cannot be paid for it, as opposed to many professions where it's a paid internship. That's not legal. However, through the apprenticeship grant, they are also paid through that student teaching process as an employee. So it really removes a lot of the financial barriers for some, and even allows kind of that dip the toe in the water. Do I really like working with kids through the process of being an associate during the day? So that's a great opportunity. One of the other ones we have not talked about is the shortage in substitutes. And so my favorite story is my board president took action when we kept talking about the sub shortage. She has a 4-year degree, not in education, is retired. And so she took the courses to be a full-time sub, and she subs for us regularly now. So anyone with a 4-year degree who is considering substituting, there are courses that can be taken for that to allow a full-time substitute role too.
That's a great
point. We also offer that alternative pathway apprenticeship here in Davenport.
Perfect. Eric, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the TPRA grant is amazing. I know it was funded partially through the stimulus dollars that we received at the start of the pandemic. So that's been a big help. I hope that something like that continues. That's a continued priority kind of moving forward in future years. I know we got that extended for 1 more year, and I'm just hoping that will continue. But yeah, it's a struggle, just to get people into that role, you know, knowing that they're working a full-time job and then also taking the coursework as well. But you know, any and every opportunity that's available is going to be big for us.
I want to remind our audience members, if you have a question, this is a great time. We're coming up in our last 10 minutes, so a good opportunity to go a little bit deeper on any of the topics that we have discussed thus far, or introduce a new concept. Like I said, we got 10 minutes, so we may not be able to go too deep on it, but it'd be a good opportunity to at least get it on our radar and start some conversation. As we transition here, I would love to just kind of get it back to what you shared, Janelle, this idea of celebrate, advocate, and legislate. And I'd love for you guys, the three of you each, to maybe take that and if you were to talk to an opportunity to talk to the community and think about what role our community members can play underneath those three things, and maybe one or two actions that if I was a concerned, you know, supportive community member and I wanted to do my part in helping our school districts in our community, what are one or two things that I could do under each one of those things to help this initiative? So Janelle, why don't you start? And I'll give Jamie and Eric a little time to maybe organize some thoughts under those buckets. So what's one thing a community member can do to help you guys celebrate the education space?
One thing I would say is just be informed about the positive things going on. I think it's fair to say that our schools are part of the economic development in any community. So to have a school that is a positive space helps to bring people in to live and work in your community. It's a critical aspect. And so regardless of your profession or whether you have your own kids in school or not, schools matter for your community. So every school now has social media pages. They have a website. Probably most people know somebody who works in a school. Get to know or ask questions about what's going well in your school. Tell me about something positive that happened. It's not common or not uncommon to ask about the struggles, but ask about the great things going on, because there are so many of those as well. And we are often Iowa humble. It doesn't, it don't share our positive stories enough. And so it helps when community members ask what's going well. As far as advocating within education, for us to be the sole voice saying our teachers, our educators need support, can fall short. And so to have parents who have experienced something positive, or grandparents, or a community member who's volunteering, to be able to also then share, hey, here's how we can support our schools, to be that voice within the community, to say, to share some of those celebrations, to advocate for ways to support our schools, because ultimately then we're supporting our future of Iowa by supporting our students. That's the aspect of advocating, when others tell the positive message about schools, and it's not just the people in schools, it's heard differently in a good way. Legislatively, that comes down to advocacy. And I mean, I certainly can't tell everybody how to specifically advocate legislatively, but if schools matter to you, reaching out to legislators, and I have heard over and over that what they need to hear from us is stories. Don't just bury them in the data, but stories about how your schools impact you and how schools matter to you personally or your community, what that means. That matters, and it matters so much more to our legislators when they hear from non-school people, why schools matter and what they do for our communities.
Excellent. Eric, celebrate, advocate, legislate from your perspective.
You know,
folks do?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Janelle there. You know, I think about some of the things that our schools do, not just in terms of, athletics or things like that, but also, our choir is presenting at the National School Board Association. Yeah, I mean the State School Board Association conference. Sorry, like just things like that, where the opportunities that are available in public schools that our students get to do, and they can really get their there's so many things that are available, so many positive things that our students are able to do, and we just don't talk about it enough. Like, yeah, there's a newsletter, yeah, there we might say something at a school board meeting, but outside of that, you don't hear about it. Just having more opportunities to get that stuff out in the open, I think is going to be huge. As far as like advocating and legislating, I think just showing, how do we show that that's a priority? How do we I don't know, like it's one of those things where we all love our district, we all love our educators, but sometimes we look at other districts in a negative light, and that's gotta change. The other thing I would just say is that I really don't know how to answer those questions, to be honest. The big thing that I would say is that I know we all have budget constraints, we all have things that we have to live within, but with any budget, it's all about those priorities. So like, how do you show that education is a priority? How to how do we get our legislators to maybe show us that education remains a priority for us? So more questions than answers, I guess, from my end, but I agree with what Janelle was saying.
Thank you, Eric. Jamie, share a couple nuggets with us.
To piggyback off of Janelle, when we talk about celebrate, I want to celebrate Davenport Schools. We had the first collaboration with the Historical Black College and University. We brought Lincoln University's band to our band spectacular. Our band spectacular has been happening for probably 30, 40 years, but this is the first time that we had a headliner from an HBCU. We put something in front of our students that they probably have never seen and may never have the opportunity to see before. So we celebrate that. It was historical. When we talk about how can we make sure to advocate, without education, there's no other professions. All other professions start with education. And if we want other professions to continue to grow and thrive, they all must start with education. So all legislation has to look at, if we want other areas to grow, the field of technology, the field of any other areas, essentially, it has to start with education. So when we talk to our legislators, when we talk to the people who want to be our legislators, we have to ask them the tough questions. What are you going to do to help education? They're always calling. There's always a survey. There's always someone asking us, what do we want? We want our education to be better. We want the education for our students to be better. We want more money so that students can be able to have more, so class sizes aren't so large. Those are some of the things that we can do. When we have candidates for school board, when we have candidates in all those different areas, we can ask the tough questions. What are you going to do? Because they're wanting our business. They want us. When we have different businesses that try to come into our community, what are your tax dollars going to be doing to benefit our schools? Some of these things make a difference. Is there going to be a special TIF or a special something that's going to keep your tax dollars from not going to our schools? We don't always ask those questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, we are nearing the end of our session. One final call out for any last bit of a question from this audience, but if we don't see any here in the next minute or so, I really want to just thank all three of you for the work that you do. It's critically important, as you shared in your comments, Janelle. It is central to community and economic development. It's many of the reasons why people choose to live where they live centers around how they view a particular community and its school district. So as you touched on, Jamie, you play a central role in starting to shape community, shaping the minds and skills of our young folks, and hopefully they shape the future of our communities. So You've offered some great insight into the challenge that you guys are facing today. You're also doing some pretty creative things, so I commend and applaud your efforts, knowing that this is challenging stuff. And I appreciate the fact that you also realize there are no silver bullets to this. You guys continue to remain focused, try new ideas, learn from the things that you've tried, and continue to build. So thank you for that. Any final parting comments on your way out this afternoon? Janelle, anything to leave our audience with?
I would just ask that everybody who walks out of here finds an educator, somebody who works in a school, and just says thank you. It means volumes.
Excellent. Eric?
Continue supporting your educators. If you know someone who you think would be a great teacher, encourage them to get into education.
And Jamie?
To remember that in some cities, the school districts are the largest employers in that area.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thanks to all three. Thank you to the Gazette for bringing us together to have this discussion. Those of you in the audience, please carry this forward. Take what you learned here today, share this conversation with others, continue to support our educational systems. Have a great Friday, everybody. Thanks again to ITC Midwest and ACT for their sponsorship.